Welcome, Shanaaz, as usual, as we co-present this event, My Life, My Business. Wish I was here. Our theme that runs throughout is one of living your life with enjoyment, in being fully engaged with what you do, being energized every day to get up and to make a difference, impact the world, enjoying the journey, not waiting for things to become perfect in order for you to enjoy it, but rather to deliberately make the decision every day to enjoy what you do, to also measure progress, to be happy with taking little steps, looking behind you, and then celebrating what you've done and not turning your life into one of pursuing a moving goalpost, which basically is what Shanaaz spoke about a week ago, and it was entitled Progress, Not Perfection. And therefore not focusing on just achieving the next result. But Shanaaz spoke about being willing to be encouraged to take steps that indicate progress. And there was also an aspect of slow walking and therefore appreciating the progress that has been made. Anyway, if you want to listen to all of this, go into the Mufasa Coaching YouTube channel and you can download it there. Or you can just listen to the playback on Clubhouse. Another continuation of something that I presented on some time back was on using the power of questions to communicate, connect, and persuade. And it made me think about, well, what are the fundamental principles of persuasion then? As a broader topic, if you like. And hopefully we can start with this as well. And I know that Shanaaz will just unpack this further as we go along, or maybe not, who knows? Maybe I say something today that will take us, further deeper into this aspect, or some particular point, giving us the opportunity just to flesh it out. But be that as it may, fundamental question, what are the fundamental principles of persuasion? How do you get people to say yes? And how do other people get you to say yes? And I found a book on this entitled Influence by Robert B. Cialdini, The Psychology of Persuasion. So hopefully we'll get through this afternoon in the time that we've allocated for our chat. But starting first and foremost, just some background. The author, Robert, wrote this book as he always felt like a patsy. He believed that, he was like someone who's always easy to trick and to manipulate. And I don't know who of us feels the same. I certainly do. I remember as a student in the Western Cape, I used to travel by train, and there's a place called Belleville there. And I used to take the train up to Belleville and then walk that distance to the University of the Western Cape. Maybe it was because of the way I looked. I looked very young for my age, appeared to be extremely innocent, but I became a target for every single person who told me some sort of story to try and get me to either help them, bail them out, whatever the case might be. I had to learn, or I thought I had to learn, how to not have this come hither face. So I also felt I was such a target for manipulation. I would be standing in a crowd and somebody would pick me out and decide, aha, there's my mark. And I just absolutely hated the prospect. So, I don't know if I succeed. I think with age comes the ability, I suppose, to look a certain way and not look as naive as I probably did, coming from Pietermaritzburg at that stage. So, Robert says that our brains like shortcuts. He used this term, and they can be used to manipulate us. He says the world is a complex place where it's impossible for us to reflect upon the details of every decision we make. Thus, we use quick shortcuts, and most of the time it serves us well. So one example of this is that we're much more willing to people or we're much more willing to grant people a favor if they provide us with a reason, and by the way, any reason for that matter. In an experiment, he studied this phenomenon. A researcher asked people queuing up to use a copying machine whether she could skip the line. She found that if she gave a reason, may I skip the line because I'm in a rush, 94% of people complied with her request. If she gave no reason, only 60% complied. I even found that statistic interesting. And 60%, is still significant. So fascinatingly, if she gave a nonsensical reason, like, may I skip the line because I need to make copies, 93% still complied. Now, the context of this is you're standing in a queue waiting to make copies. Everybody's queuing to make copies. People still comply because it's a shortcut. There's a reason for me wanting to do a certain thing. There's a reason for me wanting somebody to do something for me, and any reason will do. As long as it sounds reasonable, I'll do it. So he calls advertisers, salesmen, and even con artists, he calls them compliance professionals. And he says they can fool us into using our shortcuts against our own interests. They usually do this to get us to comply with their demands and, for example, to buy a product or to fall for the con. For example, price equals quality as a shortcut. So people assume that expensive items are of a higher quality than cheap ones. And while this shortcut is often at least partially accurate, a wily salesman might well use it against us. For instance, souvenir shops often sell unpopular goods by raising rather than lowering their prices. So as I was reading this, it's like, oh, okay, I've fallen for this before, so it's not on special. So it must be the good stuff. And it's viewed as a shortcut, right? If you just understand the basis for using this word in this context is price equals quality. So since our brains love shortcuts, there are so many different principles that can be exploited for persuasion. And so he discusses 6 basic psychological principles, and let's see if we get through any of these or all of this. If only some, well, at least we've made a point from his perspective. So the first one is really the principle of reciprocation. And he says humans have an overpowering need to return favors. And when someone does us a favor and we do not return it, we feel a psychological burden. Now, when we extend a favor to someone and they don't return it, you know what? We label them as sponges. So we therefore fear being labeled as such ourselves. So people are so keen to rid themselves of the burden of reciprocity that they will often perform much larger favors in return for small ones. I mean, if you just examine this, if it's around that time of the year, it's getting closer to the festive season, but there are also different people celebrating different things, like Diwali. One of the aspects of Diwali is to take sweetmeats around the neighborhood, give it to neighbors. It's just one of the things. I grew up in a neighborhood like that in Pietermaritzburg, and I used to love it. Sweetmeats deluxe is really part and parcel of Diwali, and then fireworks and so forth. But that hospitality. But just imagine that neighbors invite you out for dinner, etc., and the pressure of reciprocity begins to kick in because you have been invited out for dinner, you need to invite that person out for dinner. If somebody and so looking out for opportunities to do so, and until you do, you feel that the field has not been the playing field has not been leveled. And so we rather want to avoid the psychological burden of not returning a favor. So therefore, the point being, if somebody does us a little favor, chances are you will be delivering a much bigger favor than what has been extended to you. And just think about the context of this book. It's about persuasion and realizing this. And so how does this actually done? How do you use this, and how is it used to get you to do things? So number one, you can learn to identify the principle of reciprocity and therefore resist deliberate attempts to abuse it. So the first thing is that you've got to ask yourself, is the favor genuine? Or is the favor an attempt to manipulate you? So you just got to be aware and use the power of discernment. Like many times, if you think about an example by a charity and how they would use this powerful principle of reciprocity, is that they might give you a little gift. Like they're standing on a table and they give you a little gift and you say, "Oh, that is so nice," and they might pin it onto your shirt or blouse or t-shirt, and you are so grateful that it's like, oh, they've given you something for free. You need to give something back in return. And they do this so well. And I'm in the charity business myself, and I thought oh wow, is this what I'm doing? So you got to ask, if a charity or an organization like this does give you something, and you now feel the need to return the favor, you got to ask yourself, is the only reason you wanting to return a favor is because you feel obliged because you've received the gift? It's like, look how clever supermarkets are. You know, these little tasters that they have around the supermarket. I've never thought about it. I thought it was just pure advertising, but advertising uses this principle of reciprocity. So, you taste, and because you've tasted whatever it is, and mostly, where tasters are concerned, you see a little toothpick stuck into something and you've tasted it and you go, oh, yum, or nice, or whatever. You either feel obliged to give feedback, or guess what? You feel obliged to buy the very thing that you've tasted. In my own example, we did the soft launch of the Griffin Foundation, and we tried to sell tickets, and not one ticket. In fact, no, let me be more accurate. We sold 3 tickets to the launch, and we needed to just break even on what we spent for the whole launch. We needed to sell 50 tickets. And so the moral of the story is, in the last week before the launch, staring this prospect in the face that we're just going to have to carry the cost anyway, it was too late to cancel anything. Deposits have been paid. People are going to be flying in, presenters and so on. And so you know what we did? I said, okay, fine. Since nobody wants to buy tickets, and I'm talking about friends and family included, we just picked up the phone and we invited everybody to a free breakfast. And the only thing that we would like them to do is just come and listen to our presentation as we launch the foundation. So we ended up having about 30 people in the room, and we had a wonderful breakfast. Now, part and parcel of what we did was quite interesting, is we did a prize draw. We had 3 prizes that people could win, and the value of the prizes were around about I think 72,000 rand, if I can remember correctly, but it was over 70,000 rand worth of prizes. And we drew the prizes, but everybody had to, in an envelope, either put a pledge in or some money, whatever the case might be, to participate. And we raised over 80,000 rand in both direct donations and pledges, doing the prize giving than what we could in terms of selling the ticket. So as I was, thinking about this, and so but this is the powerful principle of reciprocity. It's actually quite a spiritual principle. If you want to get, you give first and foremost. So there's no judgment on this. Is this got to know is that when you do this in all sincerity, there's often a return. So and that return is if you're going to be generous in any way, make sure that your measure is not minuscule. Use a large measure if you're going to be generous, because by that measure you use, it will be measured back to you. So what is the learning in all of this is be aware that favors are not being used to manipulate you. So be able to discern whether the favor is just manipulation in disguise. Because the truth of the matter is favors do warrant favors in return, but tricks do not. So be aware when you are being tricked. Also, in negotiations, there's also what they call the rejection then retreat strategy. It's basically starting with an outrageous request and retreating from there in order for you to win a concession. And how this works is when you're negotiating, you start out with a contrast, basically, right? And you present two items, one after the other, and the difference of the second to the first is magnified. And the example being used in the book is a little boy standing and selling tickets to a circus as a fundraiser, and the boy represents the Boy Scouts. And the tickets, and I'm going to give it an amount, the tickets cost around about 200 Rand to go to the circus event. So it is when you turn down the option of buying the ticket, the little boy then goes and he says, okay, well, since you're not going to buy, the ticket from me, would you like to buy some chocolates at 2 Rands each? And what then tends to happen, and the psychology of it, is you buy not just one chocolate, you probably buy about 10 chocolates because the boy didn't get what they want. So now as a concession, you feel obliged to reciprocate. So you buy far more than what you would have if you just offered the chocolates in return. And so as a negotiation, and another one is, and you might have been exposed to this from clever salespeople, is they make an offer. They say the value of this item, let's say, is 60,000 Rand. But we're offering this item today only at a special price of 3,000 Rand. And so it's the same principle, huge concession, and guess what? Our eyes light up. And because the person is willing to make that concession, we want to meet them halfway. It's just like we can't help ourselves and we buy this item at 3,000 Rand. All right? And I've done that in the past, for sure. I will not lie. So as a negotiation principle, the book says, is that you start with an offer that you are pretty sure will be rejected. And then you retreat from your initial offer, and then you offer the price that you really want, or the thing that you really want. And so the psychology of this is that your opponent will probably see this as a concession and feel obliged to make a concession in return, and therefore reciprocate. And so this principle of reciprocation is that is something that we need to become aware of. Is we can't help ourselves. If somebody's been good to us, we want to be good to them. It is when somebody is manipulating us, we need to see through that and realize, well, this is not sincere. It's not a true favor. It's not true kindness. There are what we normally would identify as there are some powerful strings attached, but we can't help ourselves. to me, it's one of those unconscious knee-jerk things that we all do. But if you think about it, if you harness this principle and you are authentic in what you're doing and you're sincere in what you're doing, if you honestly want to bless somebody, you will be blessed in return. So that's how you can harness reciprocation. So, that's one of the 6 principles. Then there's another principle called scarcity. Wow. It seems like I'm not going to get through all these principles, but let's just see if I can unpack scarcity and just briefly introduce the other ones. But the principle of scarcity is one when opportunities become scarce, we tend to desire them more. It's like in sales, last chance. The sale ends in 2 days. While stocks last, all these little triggers begin to persuade us to buy. Because guess what? We humans see opportunities as more valuable if their availability is limited, and then FOMO kicks in. And what is FOMO? Fear of missing out. I mean, this is in marketing books, basically, and how to harness this fear of missing out. It's incredible that we cannot resist this fear of missing out, especially when we think that availability is limited and therefore things are more valuable. Now, 2 conditions need to be fulfilled to harness this principle of scarcity on our decision making. The first one is that to understand is that we tend to want something more if its availability has decreased suddenly than if it has remained steady over time, right? Because that needs to kind of connect with the impulsiveness within us in that moment. And secondly, competition always sets our hearts racing. Like, for example, if you consider what happens during Black Friday, it's that so many things are on special and they're obviously limited. Stocks are finite, and we're competing with other buyers to be able to seize the bargain. Nothing like scarcity to make the adrenaline rush. And how to counter the principle of scarcity is to ask quite simply, do we want the item due to its use to us or merely due to the irrational need to possess it? Now, I don't know if any of you listening to this, how many times you've asked yourself this. My senior pastor always says when it comes to wanting to buy a car, he says it's all fine, it's well and good to go shopping, to go and have a look around. He says, but here's something that you need to be aware of. You walk in, and when you find the right one, when you think you found the right one, the right car, the thing that you truly desire, and your heart begins to pound, he says, use that moment to walk out of the store and go sleep on it. And if your heart is still pounding as loudly as what it was the day before, then obviously go back in. But that gives you the chance to really think things through. Then there's a quote that I want to share. It says, the way to love anything is to realize that it might be lost. So reverse psychology. And also, banning something makes it more desirable. Interesting enough. We all know what happened to liquor sales during COVID-19 in South Africa when we had stage 5 lockdown. I mean, liquor sales were banned and people still found different interesting ways to still access liquor. Some even resorted to crime, ransacking liquor stores and hijacking trucks, delivery vehicles into communities. Then there's also something else to consider, is the Romeo and Juliet effect in romantic relationships. It's been said that couples' feelings of love and desire for marriage intensified when parents tried to interfere in the relationship. And the converse is also true. And when the interference lessened, romantic feelings tended to cool off too. I chuckled when I, read this, but, therefore I chuckle again. So, the other four principles centers on consistency, on social proof, and of liking people that we identify, and also how we see authority. And what is and I'm just going to briefly touch on these very, very briefly. What is consistency also about? All about consistency in the sense of the book is that we want our actions as human beings to be consistent with what we said. For example, if we're on a beach, etc., and we bury our wallet and our phone in the sand while taking a swim, it is said that 20% of the people around us will react without being asked to watch for the personal belongings. But that percentage greatly increases if 90% of our neighbors would react when asked to actually look after our personal belongings, which means you've asked the question, hey, do you mind just looking after something while I go swim? The moment your neighbors agree that they will do that, in the moment they don't have to make the decision. They've already agreed that they were going to do it. All they need to do is just keep a promise. So it makes life easier. And the other thing is commitment dictates consistency. Like, for example, when you sign a contract and you sign an agreement. So an astute salesman, for example, will turn a prospect into a customer by making a small sale. Just buy this pen for 5 Rand if you like. As soon as he converts you into a customer, that sense of commitment is suddenly there. I'm a customer, I bought something. And it opens you up to be far more amenable to purchase something that costs a lot more. So really be careful when you're out bargain hunting, and so on and so on and so on. That's consistency. Social proof is literally, it means that if the crowd and everybody else is doing it, then you will be doing it too. So the crowd sways your decision making. And like, for example, in sitcoms, they use laugh tracks. So there's the audience sitting in there. So even when a joke is not that great, they play this laugh track and the audience laughs and you're watching it and you're laughing too, and you laugh quite long because everybody else is laughing. Something is funny because everybody else is laughing. So yes, so we are drawn to what the majority is actually doing and we follow suit. It's like this herding effect. Then liking is that if we like somebody, because they either appear to be similar to us, and marketers use the ordinary people syndrome, but it's scripted, so you just got to be careful of this. And we comply with people that we like, and basically, part and parcel of this, the halo effect comes into play, because when we find someone physically attractive, we see them as smart, kind, and believe you me, we see them as honest. And guess what? We are easily influenced and persuaded by people in this manner. And we like them because they're physically attractive. And lastly, authority. This one we can certainly unpack a lot more. We obey authorities without question. And mere symbols of authority can already win our compliance. And so, from birth, we are always taught to obey figures of authority. Teachers, doctors, and, people who are suitably qualified. And therefore, titles are powerful symbols of authority. If somebody is called a professor or a doctor, guess what? Or president. That's why titles are so powerful. Your Honor, Honorable so-and-so. We see them as immediately credible people that we need to listen to. And also clothes and material possession and props are the kinds of things that we unconsciously look towards. If somebody is wearing incredibly expensive things, we therefore believe that they are credible people and worthy to look up to. And so in the end, I just want to conclude with this. Knowing that there are these 6 basic psychological principles to persuade people, obviously, if you are being manipulated, avoid the manipulation by being aware of what's being used against you. But you can consciously use these principles if you are sincere and authentic, right? And I'm going to end it there today.
That's so interesting because I was, as you're going through this list of things, I was making a number of comments, and I was actually thinking that this book could be turned into like these are the classical red flags of relationships, girls and guys, and everyone. Because some of them, but it's, yeah, I mean, literally, just because someone is attractive, physically attractive, wearing expensive clothes, does not necessarily mean that they are honest, and and we yet we fall for these things. So and I was actually thinking there's definitely so much psychology in buying things, and I wish that when I'm particularly doing community work, I'm always so consciously aware of how, for example, name brands are such a thing
Mm,
in communities with low income, and how I try to convince them and share with them that the brands use that against people, and
mm,
so you are buying out of your psychological need, not because you really need it.
mm.
And Nike, for example, I mustn't mention brand, but it's classic. Just do it
Yes.
because you are not empowered to do things that gives you, and so for me it's about educating communities about this. But I mean, you can also use that in a genuine, authentic way, kind way, to to um persuade others is a good way. That, what I want to say, for the good. So for example, if we want to bring about a change in a group of people regarding their attitudes towards gender, you
Mm,
can use the power of a group, the majority. You
mm.
can use a number of the principles that you mentioned, to change people and to be kind, for example. So yeah, um, I'll definitely go and think about some of these things that you mentioned. This is really interesting.
Well, and so well, I want to continually just chew on this and to be aware and look and appreciate. You see, what we tend to do is we shy away from, like, nobody likes cold calling and, oh, I don't want to be like a salesperson, but they use some great tools, and they use it to manipulate you. But we can use this, as you say, for the greater good, to convince people, to live lives of impact. Do it in such a way that you can have a change of mindset and bring people to those aha moments. And but yes, I had to chuckle myself when I was doing when I was just preparing. So yes, influence people in a certain way, how to persuade them, how to negotiate. Be aware that when they are negotiating with you, what are the principles that are being either consciously or unconsciously uh, employed, being used, and be an active participant, a conscious one, and stay discerning. At the end of the day, wrap it up in this way. One of the things that we always say in our talks is that in this journey of life that we are enjoying so much, it's not you traveling on your own, it's you traveling with others, it's you collaborating with others, it's about partnerships, it's about relationships. So, you know, therefore, apply the basic principles of influence in relationships. Travel with others, but travel with like minded people, travel with like hearted people. So, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Shanaaz. Thank you, Julia. And until next week,
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jacques, and we'll chat next week.
chat next week.
Thank
All
you.
right, bye.
Bye.